Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and as always, welcome back to yet another Mortal Kombat video, but most importantly, the return of the History of the Multiverse series, a deep dive lore retrospective of your favourite characters from the series. But unlike how we've previously done them before, because whilst we've always tackled their more mainline counterparts, today we'll be transcending beyond the canonical plane, delving deep into the long, illustrious, bloody history of Scorpion throughout spin-off games, films, and TV shows. But before we do get the ball rolling on this one, I do actually strongly recommend checking out the History of Scorpion video, as it does tackle him within the main canon. It essentially functions as a baseline video that this one branches off. So I strongly recommend giving that one a watch before diving right into this one. So without any further ado, quick reminder as always that if you like what we do here and wish to see more, please don't forget to subscribe as well as give this video a thumbs up. As whilst it is a small thing, it helps the channel monumentously in the algorithm. Anyway, let's begin, shall we? Now to begin weaving this thread, let's first cut into the spin-off line of games, starting off with a fan favourite here, Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. Now the game itself is a very loose retelling of Mortal Kombat 2, meaning that what happens prior in Mortal Kombat 1 as well as mythologies is indeed canonical. So Be Harnessed Dead, killed by Scorpion, cementing the blood feud between Scorpion and Sub-Zero's successor, Kuai Liang. And we do actually see this fight play out in motion, as they would appear during the opening cutscene of the game, where a massive brawl ensues in the climax at the end of the first tournament. Here, Scorpion can be seen fighting Kung Lao and Sub-Zero, who knocks him down in the middle of the ferocious battle, but is able to slip through his fingers due to a portal created by Shang Tsung. Whilst a playable figure upon the game's completion, Scorpion, by all intents and purposes, is an antagonist in this game, as his role is to serve as a boss for the Shaolin duo of Liu Kang and Kung Lao, whilst of course still firmly being locked in his war with Sub-Zero, even sneak attacking him at one point in a failed effort. But this wouldn't be the only time we see Hanzo, as he would appear a bit later in the game in the depths of the Netherrealm, and whilst he does gain the advantage by blindsiding them, such tactics can only get him so far in this fight, as he's bested and tossed into the pits of the Netherrealm. But this was a really foolish choice, because by being a Spectre of Hell, Scorpion is able to engulf the flames in a very new form, allowing him to go toe-to-toe once more with his second win. And as expected, he would be defeated once more by the Shaolin, then being drowned in the pits of hell. Now, following this particular point, it's unknown if Scorpion lived or died, as Shaolin Monks was intended to get a sequel known as Ice and Fire, but with that game indefinitely shelved and later cancelled, it's unknown what became of this iteration of the Hell Spectre. Now, another spin-off game that is unbelievably loose in the canon is the forbidden 8th installment, Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe, taking place after the events of Mortal Kombat 3, in the fallout of Shao Kahn's invasion where he's weakened and hurt. The worlds of the DC Universe and Mortal Kombat would collide via a boom tube and portal merging together, effectively functioning as a gateway conduit between the two worlds. During this installment, things kind of follow the events of prior games, so there's no drastic changes nor alterations to that of Hanzo's character, as we do see he's still under the service of Quan Chi. Now, Scorpion actually appears pretty early on in the game's story, being seen in the first chapter hunting down Sub-Zero, and he nearly is successful until he's halted by Liu Kang. Forcing Kuai to leave, the two would do battle, with the Spectre understandably being defeated by the champion of Mortal Kombat. But as he slowly tries to gather his senses, the terraforming would begin, and he would switch places with the Flash, putting him in the Batcave against the Cape Crusader himself. Understandably dazed and unprepared for Batman, he is beaten by the Dark Knight and taken into custody, even at one point taking a sweet ride in the Batmobile. However, with all of the anomaly tears across both planes of reality, this does give Hanzo the time and window to escape, returning back to the Netherrealm, and with his master restrained by the Elder Gods themselves, the Spectre would be given the mission of drawing the vengeful Cryomancer into the depths of hell, because by the two colliding, the tears that would crack and ripple in the Netherrealm would allow Quan Chi to break free, undoing his shackles to cause more chaos. However, things would transpire in a very different way. With the brink of both worlds on Annihilation, Scorpion's master had the Lin Kuei send a message to Raiden that they would have to forge an alliance to stop the worlds from splintering. And as a sign of good faith, Quan Chi would actually have Scorpion travel out and hunt down the lost Princess Kitana, using her as a bargaining chip of sorts, as well as knowing that she stared into the heart of madness, inflicted upon her by Dark Khan. Such a journey though would not be quite as simple, with Scorpion having to travel multiple planes of reality in order to find her. This drew him to the lands of Themyscira, where he fought Wonder Woman, and then later Metropolis, where he beat Superman, and finally seized the princess. With Kitana captured, a very uneasy alliance would form, as both Earthrealm, the Netherrealm, and Outworld had now joined forces. Even having it so, Scorpion and Sub-Zero would tag together, battling the likes of Catwoman and Lex Luthor, but in a losing effort. With neither side falling, both worlds inevitably combined into this terraformed astral plane, serving as the final stand for both sides, with Scorpion battling the speedster Flash. Now, ultimately depending on player choice, Raiden or Superman would go on to defeat Dark Khan, separating both worlds from one another and restoring both realities. Now this would actually mark the end of this particular timeline and era, as its continuity would not be continued moving forward, and Midway would later be rebranded as NetherRealm Studios. But it is worth mentioning that in his arcade ladder ending, that upon Dark Khan's defeat, his essence would seek out a suitable host, finding Scorpion to be the perfect vessel. Now, due to how incredibly vague the dialogue is here, it's believed that the outcome of this goes one of two ways. That Hanzo dies from the absolute vast amount of power inflicted upon him, or that he survives to become the new Dark Khan. Ultimately though, we'll never truly know what became of this outcome. So, with us concluding MK vs DC, this then brings us onto another DC fighter, Injustice Gods Among Us. Although Scorpion isn't part of the main game story, he would feature as part of the roster via DLC. Of course, the first of what would be many MK character crossovers with the series moving forward. Now the information surrounding this particular Scorpion is actually quite bare, but from what we see of him here, we are able to put together a rough idea of where this Scorpion is from and how his canon aligns. So from his voice lines, acting and dialogue, it's pretty safe to confirm that this iteration of Scorpion here is actually the one from Mortal Kombat 9, having been challenged by Kuai Liang during the events of the second tournament. But unlike the events of the game itself, Kuai actually fails in his attempts to avenge his brother, as he's defeated and about to be slain. But by chance and or fate, Scorpion would then suddenly be teleported to the Injustice universe by unknown means, where he's then pitted against the regime and insurgency of Batman and Superman. Needless to say, his time in this universe is short but sweet. And in his arcade ladder ending, after the fall of this world's Superman, Scorpion would then be directly challenged by the demon god Trigod, mistaking Hanzo as a spectre amongst his own army. Seeing power for the taking, Scorpion would directly challenge him to mortal combat, defeating the deity and becoming Hell's new appointed ruler. With a lust for conquest, Scorpion turns his gaze to the surface world, wishing to lay claim to his former home. Now this does cap off the spin-off games that Scorpion has featured in, taking us onto our next segment here, live action movies. Which does of course mean we'll now be talking about the 1995 live action movie. Despite the unbelievable popularity of the ninjas during this time period, Scorpion as well as Sub-Zero would only play a minor antagonistic role in the film, acting as both guards and enforcers of Shang Tsung's will, so their appearances are quite sparse throughout the film. And in terms of character, background as well as origins here, it would actually be the expanded media beyond these films though, that would essentially do the heavy lifting. Something I will touch on a tad bit later on. For the time being, they are more or less fully committed to their henchman villain roles. But it must be said that whilst their time is a glimmer here, their presence is most certainly felt as they appear very early on, showing off their unique abilities, threatening Earthrealm's champions. If it wasn't for Raiden's interference, this fight could have ended far earlier than the tournament started, which now actually takes us up to the tournament itself, where he would make his next and final appearance during the film, appointed the mission of slaying Johnny Cage. With the open terrain, Johnny has nowhere to go and is nearly killed by his living harpoon. It's only until it's destroyed, while Hanzo decides to take a home field advantage, teleporting the actor to the Netherrealm. By taking him to this unfamiliar terrain, he does have a strong advantage against Cage. However, it's the loose weapons left behind from the Damned that would be his kryptonite, as a spear and shield be utilized to defeat the Spectre, causing him to literally be cut apart before he then would explode, ending his time within the tournament, but not that of the series itself, because due to his supernatural nature, he would later appear in the movie sequel, Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Tragically though, much like the prior film, he's given yet another tiny role, appointed the mission and task of capturing Princess Kitana for Shao Kahn, with the Emperor needing her as bait to draw out the remainder of Earthrealm's champions. This pursuit would actually bring him to blows with Liu Kang and Kitana, but most importantly for us fans, Sub-Zero's younger brother, Kuai Liang, having now donned his brother's colours. And much like the games, it is Scorpion who does get the victory here, leaving the Cryomancer dangling for his life, forcing Liu Kang's hand to intervene. By lowering his guard, this allows Scorpion the opportunity to kidnap the princess, fulfilling his quest to the Emperor as the chances of outward survival dwindles. So whilst his role is very bare, he does actually play quite an important role here. Beyond this though, Scorpion tragically does fade into the background, as this would be the last time we see him in this timeline and era. In fact, we wouldn't see another live action depiction of this character on the silver screen until 2021 in the reboot, also called Mortal Kombat. The movie's opening for the most part does actually follow the source material quite closely, with the massacre of the Shirai Ryu still occurring, as well as the death of Hanzo Hasashi and his family. However, the biggest deviation of the source material is the children of Hanzo Hasashi, having not just had Satoshi, but in fact another child that was hidden away during this massacre. Thus the blood of the Shirai Ryu would live on, but one kept in deep secrecy. That is of course up until the movie itself, with the main protagonist Cole Young. Now, the downward descent of Hanzo is done completely off screen here, as we do not see nor hear anything about Quan Chi. But we most certainly know that a deal must have been struck with him for Hanzo to return in his undead form, with his kunai serving as a vessel of sorts for his return, as it was utilized in his death. So when his kin is on the brink of despair, Scorpion would manifest from the Hells and battle Bi-Han once more, having a fairly even fight between the two. It's only by banding with Corvo where the two are able to overpower the Cryomancer. And with his defeat, Hanzo would claim vengeance, incinerating his arch-nemesis, allowing him to finally rest, or at least until the sequel comes out. This does now take us onto the live-action TV show, starting with the of course cult-beloved series Mortal Kombat Conquest. Now Conquest is a very interesting show to the series, because not only does it exist outside the main canon of games, but it's directly tied as a prequel of sorts to the '95 movie, being set during the Great Kung Lao era, so with it taking place far earlier than the original series. How exactly does Scorpion fit into things here? Well, he's done in a very different way. By building off the mythos and established canon of the Hell Spectre persona, here Scorpion isn't so much Hanzo Hasashi, but in fact a malevolent spirit that can take control and influence people under its will. Think your more common well-known demons that act through possession. That's essentially what this depiction is going for, and we do see it in action very early on, when Scorpion infects and possesses a friend of the Great Kung Lao, Takeda. Because following the events of Shang Tsung's defeat at the tournament, the sorcerer would unleash the demon to slay his nemesis, preying on Kung Lao's beloved Jen in order to draw out the Shaolin. And whilst there is an even match for the most part, Lao is able to gain the upper hand and defeat the husk of his former friend. So such a victory did come at a price, as whilst the Spectre was defeated, it was at the cost of Takeda. and this would not be the last time we see him, as he's a bit of a reoccurring villain throughout the saga, having formed his own clan in the depths of the Netherrealm. An absolute far cry of the Shirai Ryu, as he would only recruit members of the mortal plane for that of his army. He would even go on to brainwash one of the protagonist's brothers, Kazar, later killing him as he broke free of his control. Scorpion would make his last and final appearance in a very fragile relationship with Lin Kuei, appointed by the Emperor Shao Kahn to join forces with the Cryomancer, with all sides agreeing to wanting to end the Great Kung Lao. But as expected, they simply can't put their egos aside to coexist, leading to the alliance very quickly crumbling, with Sub-Zero breaking their deal and killing members of Scorpion's army, effectively severing his ties from that of the Lin Kuei, branding himself as a traitor. Even with these issues in mind though, this would not dissuade Scorpion from his quest, later leading to a battle between the two ninjas that would end in a stalemate. Unfortunately, with Conquest only having one season, we don't know what was the planned future for this interpretation. Even so though, it's left wide open enough that it still does quite nicely fit into the 95 movie. Now, a decade or so later, when the series was invigorated under Warner Brothers, there would be an online semi-official short known as Mortal Kombat Rebirth. And Rebirth itself was designed as a reboot of the franchise with a modern, gritty, realistic take on the series, having it be set in the modern day world and being largely absent of any fantastical elements. So this iteration of Hanzo Hasashi is pretty damn different from that of the lore, being implied that he isn't at all supernatural, or even a spectre for that matter, but simply a proficient assassin, one that was on a bloody mission of vengeance, softly implying the end of the Shirai Ryu. Upon acquiring his justice, he would then turn himself in. Here though is where things take a really weird turn, as with the rise of other dangerous assassins like Reptile and Baraka, Jackson Briggs would seek to hire the assassin and have him participate in the tournament to eliminate such threats. At first, Hanzo declines and isn't that interested, until he learns that Sub-Zero is participating, somehow still alive, and this was all he needed to hear in order to pursue his arch nemesis. Of course, due to Rebirth serving as a demo of sorts, it would be discontinued following its preview. But due to a lot of online fanfare and reception, a future series would be greenlit called Mortal Kombat Legacy, a series that did retain some realistic elements, but did actually delve and draw influence from its source material, with this version of Scorpion being both similar, yet also quite different in its own unique interpretation. Here we would be taken to the past, and learn that at a very young age, Bi-Han and Hanzo Hasashi were in fact friends, ones that battled and played with each other in the fields that tethered on the edge of each clan's territory. Their friendship and bond was one that transcended any code within the clan, but such a friendship would actually dissipate, as once they were found by their elders, they would be driven away from each other. Yet, it would be their kinship that they felt for one another that really cemented their desire as adults to be better than their predecessors, to have it so both clans could coexist in unison with each other. Such a vision though would not be entirely shared by the clan, more specifically Bi-Han's younger brother, Kuai Liang, with the young man seeking to stoke the flames by holding Satoshi hostage. With no other choice, Hanzo's hand is forced to retaliate, killing the young Kuai Liang of this timeline and era. And whilst it most certainly shook the foundation of their relationship, their alliance looked to still remain quite firm, at least so it seemed. Hanzo would be appointed the mission of finding the Shogun, coming to the horrible realization that it was far too late. The Shogun had been frozen alive, and when Hanzo came to his senses, he would be ambushed by Sub-Zero. He would try his best and plead to Bi-Han's better nature, but it fell on the deaf ears of the Grand Master, forcing Hanzo to render him unconscious. Once the dust finally settled on this battle, Hanzo realized that this was all but a ploy, a way to draw him out and leave his clan unprotected. So once Hanzo ran home, he would once again bear witness to the death of the Shirai Ryu, and it's in his grief where he'd let his guard down, allowing Bi-Han to slay him. With this of course actually having been Quan Chi in disguise. So by preying on that deception and betrayal he felt, Quan is once again able to put him under his control, having him pledge his loyalty as Scorpion. And we would very quickly see this come to fruition in Season 2, because he would claim his pound of flesh during the tournament, having gone up against his former childhood friend and simply overwhelming Bi-Han, giving him both a swift and really brutal demise. And with Legacy having ended after 2 seasons, this is largely the conclusion we have for this character, as there's been little to no information of what becomes of him moving forward. And this now takes us onto the more animated side of the series, beginning with one of its earliest depictions, Mortal Kombat: The Journey Begins. And this one is super strange in terms of how it's even set in its own continuity, because bear with me here, as it's designed to be a sequel to Mortal Kombat Conquest, but also designed to take place before and kind of during the events of the '95 movie, recounting the origins and background of characters. So as expected, once again, we are given an incredibly soft recap of the feud between Scorpion and Sub-Zero, from which of course Scorpion does perish, albeit in a much more kid-friendly manner. And talking about kid-friendly, this would take us onto Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm, a series that ever so loosely takes place during the events of Mortal Kombat 3, but does also combine elements from that of the '95 movie. It creates this very unique hybridized canon of the two, where things aren't entirely the same. Here, Scorpion is a vengeful spirit who is given a dishonorable death. Due to this end, he lives in an eternal state of limbo, not bound to life, but unable to have a true death. So, out of bitterness and spite, he would terrorize the mortal plane out of satisfaction. Also, it's worth noting and pointing out that due to the saga combining elements from the '95 movie, it's not actually Scorpion that kills Sub-Zero here. So the blood feud between the two isn't quite there, but their clans are still rival to one another, so it exists in one way, shape and form, just not the way we're familiar with. Now to exact revenge on the mortal plane, Scorpion would travel to the Tibetan mountains in order to open up a portal, one that would allow his undead army to lay siege to every possible world. But to achieve such a goal and success, Scorpion knew that he needed someone with expertise in the dark arts, seeking out the remains of the sorcerer Shang Tsung. But once he reaches his gravestone, he would be confronted by the likes of Liu Kang and Kuai Liang. His battle against Kuai would be very swift and simple, but against the champion of Mortal Kombat, he's simply unable to defeat the Shaolin. In order to prevent such a dangerous threat from going unchecked, Raiden would have Scorpion frozen and incarcerated to the Netherrealm, shackling him to the realm of the dead for the foreseeable future. So with the more child-friendly adaptations done, this now brings us onto the more recent line of animated movies, starting off with Mortal Kombat Legends Scorpion Revenge. Now this interpretation of the character does actually follow the lore quite closely, as it opens up with the death of the Shira Ryu and absolutely brutal end of Satoshi and Hanzo. Beyond this point though, a lot does change and is altered, because we actually get to see and explore Hanzo's time in the Netherrealm, how he is maliciously tortured by a massive Oni. But the rage Hanzo feels in his heart would not be one quenched by the demon, unleashing a bloody red path unseen by even the likes of demons themselves. He would rip and tear his way to the highest point, meeting Quan Chi. In the demon's domain, Hanzo is simply not a match, but by seeing the amount of potential that Hanzo wields, and knowing of the devastation that was laid before him, he would offer him an opportunity for salvation, to avenge his clan through the Mortal Kombat tournament, of which Sub-Zero was participating, but it would all be in exchange for Shinnok's key, a way to unlock the fallen Elder God. With no other option, Hanzo would take this offer, embracing his title of Scorpion. And during this tournament, he goes on an absolute tear, as his goals are very simple: kill Sub-Zero and acquire the key. And he nearly does until he's confronted by Raiden, who recognizes the suffering of the Spectre, but says that he knows he's not beyond redemption, that he can still be true to himself if he looks deep within. With the tournament proceeding, the slaughter would only continue, with Hanzo murdering both Lin Kuei and Black Dragon Assassin alike. Because of this, he nearly comes to blows with Earthrealm's champions, Liu Kang, Sonya Blade, and Johnny Cage. That is, until the actor is able to stave off the fight, allowing the four to have a brief moment of reprieve. And whilst appreciated, he would depart, reminding them that the next time they encountered each other, they would have to fight to the death. But it's during this time period where there would be some interference. Because of this, Hanzo would engage with the mercenaries and rip them to shreds until Sub-Zero comes to his sight. Seeking revenge, Hanzo is able to completely overpower a puzzled Bi-Han and impales both him and the Cryomancer at the bottom of the pit, wishing for this to be his end. But it's in this weary, defeated state where Quan Chi reveals the truth to him, that it was the Necromancer that slew his family and he had simply been played. With his death almost certain, Quan would escape, but in turn stoke those flames of vengeance once more. Having survived the impalement, Hanzo would directly interfere with the tournament by killing his own ally, Goro, effectively becoming Outworld's new champion. But instead of continuing to participate in this tournament, he would completely screw over both sides, as he would forfeit the tournament to Earthrealm and steal Shinnok's key, forcing Quan Chi to engage with him in Mortal Kombat, which ends with the bastard being slain. At peace with this somewhat end, Hanzo allows the island to crumble around him, yet death was not ready for Hanzo Hasashi, returning in its sequel, Mortal Kombat Battle of the Realms. During this installment, where the second tournament would take place, Scorpion is more or less completely absent from it, because following his demise at Shang Tsung's island, his body and soul would be spiritually bound with the key, now acting as a vessel of sorts for Shinnok's release. However, this was not the true purpose and design behind the key, as it was to be used to unlock the Temple of Elements to unravel the final Kamidogu, something Shinnok sought in order to become the One Being. Thus, from this point onwards, Hanzo basically becomes a man on the run, literally being the key to the end of all of the realms. And due to his resistance against Shinnok, they would employ the Cyberling Hui to track him down, leading to a very brutal hunt by these three cyborgs, and of course a new Sub-Zero, with the mantle held by Kuai Liang. Due to his interference, Hanzo would be captured and forced to open the Temple of Elements, once again doing battle with all four ninjas, but would later make amends with Kuai Liang, explaining the truth of the very messy situation. Upon learning the grand scale of what is actively in motion, the two would band together to protect the Kamidogu, only for such efforts to actually be in vain, as it would be claimed by Shinnok, and he would ascend to the One Being. With the worlds merging into one titanic clash of realms, we do see Hanzo battling the Titanic Beast alongside Sub-Zero and an Elder God ascended Liu Kang. It's an extremely back and forth fight, and by Hanzo shattering the gem piece in his forehead, it gives Liu Kang the time and opportunity he needs in order to literally pull the One Being apart, severing him piece by piece and restoring the realms to their natural state, actually marking an end to this interpretation of the character. Scorpion's last and latest animated appearance would be the Elseworld movie, Mortal Kombat Snowblind, a world and reality completely carved and re-envisioned in the dream of Kano, having forged a Mad Max-style-esque dystopian world where he is king and conqueror. In this reality, the world of heroes could not be any more different from what we've seen, as many have died and perished, or are simply a myth, as the Mortal Kombat tournament itself doesn't even seem to exist here. But of course, it wages the question with all of these alterations of how exactly is Scorpion affected by this? Well, it's done in a pretty humongous way. Whilst it's incredibly vague as to what's happened to this interpretation of Hanzo, it's implied that the Spectre here is more of a Grim Reaper of sorts, possibly even a king of the Netherrealm. It's something never fully elaborated on in the movie, but the Scorpion we see here is a very different version of what we're all familiar with, seeming far more tempered in his characterization. In this reality, Hanzo has a deal struck with a very old and battered Kuai Liang, a former member of the Ling Hui who is seeking penance after unleashing a blizzard that killed both an entire city as well as his entire clan. With his hands drenched, he would reach out to the Reaper to live in isolation for atonement, but under the oath and wish that should he ever lose control of his powers again, then Hanzo would come to claim his soul and take him to the Netherrealm. So in this reality, the two share a widely different relationship, and Hanzo himself is only summoned in the climax of the movie when Kuai Liang's protege, Kenshi, had been kidnapped by Kano's goons. Believing that he could be the future of the Lin Kuei, Kuai would gear up one final time and call upon Scorpion's aid, saying that he would fulfill his end of the bargain should he survive the oncoming battle. And these two paired together unleash a hell and fury unseen to this new world, with Scorpion racking up a pretty impressive body count by slaying No-Face, Farah, Tor, Eren Black, and even Cabal. This united front is enough to overwhelm Kano's generals and the former Keeper of the Hourglass. Thus, with the world free of the Black Dragon's influence, Kuai would honour his end of the deal with Hanzo, but not before passing on the legacy of the Lin Kuei to Takeda Takahashi, marking the end of this particular era, as well as the final segment of this video. So, with that said, and everything covered here, this has been it for the history of Scorpion across each and every bit of expanded media in the series. Well, excluding comics, but that deserves its own thing. So I do hope you have enjoyed this and learnt more by doing so. This was really fun to make and incredibly fun to explore, as I love seeing the characters' different interpretations and evolution throughout the decades. How they are all similar but different in their own unique way. Which now allows me to relay the question to all of you of which version of Scorpion here is your favourite? Which interpretation of the character sticks with you the most? Please do comment down below, as I'd love to hear your own thoughts and feelings. But for now everyone, as always, stay strong, stay well, and I'll catch you in the next one.